So today we're going to talk about narcissism. I feel that it's so common for someone to get out of a relationship and to be like, he was such a fucking narcissist. If you're someone who has said this before, then this video is definitely for you. Even if you're not someone who said this, let's dive the fuck in, okay? While talking about narcissism in this video today, we're going to use dynamics in romantic relationships as the entry point where we can really dive into this huge topic. And also, just for ease of flowing while I'm talking, I'm probably more so going to refer to the dynamic of a woman calling a man a narcissist after getting out of relationships. So I may be talking about it in that way more, but of course this ripples out to everybody. The genders can be flopped around. And so I feel like it's so common for us to other this idea of narcissism and to assume that the other person was the narcissist, which very well may be true, that they are showing up in narcissistic ways. But I feel like, as with anything, it's more useful when you actually look inward instead of focusing all of your energy and attention onto what happened in the external, to take the external as a reflection and to turn it inwards and see how this is mirroring you. Because honestly, it takes two to tango in a relationship. And if you're in a relationship and you start to notice and feel like the other person is showing up in narcissistic ways, that could really be a signal for you to turn inward and be like, am I also showing up in these ways too? So that is a very edgy thing to do. And I feel that that is the part where the triggers start coming off and people don't want to look. People don't want to really acknowledge that they actually might be also showing narcissistic traits. I want to take a step back and say, yes, this is on a spectrum where of course there's some people who are like highly narcissistic, yet we all are narcissistic in a way. I have been so narcissistic in relationships, maybe not in the very direct way, but I really believe that there is indirect narcissism, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So you've probably heard of the tale of Narcissus, where the man looks at his own reflection in the river and falls in love with it. A part that a lot of people don't really know or notice is that he wasn't actually aware that that was his reflection. There's so much symbolism within this story, and I feel like we can apply this to what we're talking about today, where, for example, when you get in a relationship with someone who is narcissistic and you end up projecting potential onto them, similar to how Narcissus fell in love with his reflection in the river. In this relationship, you fell in love with a reflection, a projection, a potential that is being projected onto this other person. Did you actually fall in love with them, or did you fall in love with your own self-concept, an idealized version of them? So to better understand this, let's dissect the traits of a narcissist and really see how these also can be mirrored in both people. So the first one is an extreme focus on self. And I pretty much just talked about this one, where this can be seen in the other partner. And when I say other partner, I'm going to talk about the one who is maybe more indirectly narcissistic, where you can see how this person is so focused on their self in the sense that they have this image that they have created of the other person, which is of self. It's not actual reality. If this person is, showing up in ways that are like super unhealthy, let's say they're like lying to you, cheating on you, verbally abusive, let's say they're doing all of these things, and you are projecting some idealized version onto them. So in this scenario, you are extremely focused on yourself, because that's not actually what's happening. So you're not actually truly seeing the person, you're just seeing them how you want them to be, how you wish that they were. And there's this dissonance between what is true and what is a projection from you. So now for number 2 is self-importance. And there's 2 things I want to talk about within this topic, where one, I feel like it's so easy to see when somebody has a really inflated sense of self that they may be carrying themselves in a way of self-importance, like they are more important than other people. And I feel like that's very common to really see it in that way, to see that relationship between the two. But I think something that's overlooked a lot of times is, just as an inflated sense of self is under the category of self-importance, so is a highly deflated sense of self. When we diminish, minimize ourselves and say all of these self-deprecating things, that is still a focus on this self. Whether you're putting it up on a pedestal or pushing it down, you are making this idea of yourself as the focal point, that it's so important, instead of really just being where you're at. Because once again, I'll keep saying it over and over discover that there is a focus on this idealized version, this ideal that you are greater than other people, this ideal that you are worse than other people, which neither is actually true. You know, there may be legitimate facts, like perhaps you have more skills in some sort of topic than others, but doesn't make you better than them. And even if you don't have skills than others, doesn't make you worse. So here your focus is so distilled into illusion, essentially. And then also under the topic of self-importance, I feel like it can be very clear to see that when somebody is prioritizing their own concerns over another in an unhealthy way, let's say, because I do feel like there is a healthy way to prioritize our concerns, but you know, it's like, let's say the more directly narcissistic way, say someone's cheating, you know, if you have an agreement with your partner where you're to not sleep with other people, and let's say the other person goes and cheats on you, that can be more of a clearly narcissistic behavior, where it's like they are prioritizing their concern of getting laid over the agreement that you made in your relationship. But also, I feel like this can be seen in the way in which people prioritize others' needs over their own. And here I feel like there can be more illusion where it's like, oh, but I'm focusing on the other person. This is not a self-important, selfish behavior. I'm caring about the other person, where it has this like cover, when in reality, a lot of the times, which side note, I want to say, of course, there are healthy ways of caring about another person, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about unhealthy ways of relating to it. When you are trying to save someone, I have done this so much in my life. As I'm talking about this topic, I just want to say that I have done so much of this shit, bro. I have tried to save people in relationships. I have tried to save people through people-pleasing tendencies. I still do this. It is so deeply ingrained, and I'm continually in the process of trying to check myself and recognize when I am people-pleasing. Honestly, people-pleasing is so self-centered. That's another topic for another day, but I just want to say, like, I have done this shit, I do this shit, and I'm speaking from that space. So I'm speaking from recognizing these patterns within myself and watching other people and just learning. And I don't think I have it all figured out. I know that I don't have it figured all out, okay? I know that for a fat fact. But I'm learning and just coming on here and sharing what I am learning as I go. So just wanted to say a side note with that. But saving. I know so many people have engaged in this dynamic also. You know, I feel like there's a layer of self-importance in it, where we are trying to maintain the identity that was perhaps formed during childhood, perhaps formed even before that, but we don't need to get super like metaphysical about it. Okay, let's just talk about what's here now. Where this identity of being the hero, of being the fixer was formed, in this self, you want to maintain its importance. You want to maintain it so that it can live and exist. So you reinforce, you seek reinforcement in external sources, you know? Basically, it's like magnets, like finding relationship dynamics where somebody perhaps subconsciously wants to be saved, and then you want to do the saving, which also is mirrored within you too, because a part of you probably also wants to be saved, and it's all just one big fucking mirror. But anyways, I feel like underneath it is this subconscious seeking to be seen, to get what kind of feels like love, but it's not actually love, you know? But perhaps that was some sort of interpretation that was learned, that that is what love is, so constantly trying to seek and extract that from external sources. So in a way, sacrificing yourself to save another may seem altruistic, but in reality, it's actually very selfish, because underneath it, it is trying to reinforce that self that is the hero, the self that doesn't actually feel seen, that wants to be seen, that's trying to extract that feeling of feeling seen from another person, which you're typically ironically trying to extract it from somebody who actually is absent, because the space in which you're trying to extract it from is a space that is absent. So it's going to inevitably attract the mirror to that which is the person who's absent, you know? So it's just one big fucking trip, bro. It's actually one big fucking trip. But I talk about this stuff because I feel like it's so important to understand this shit. Like, if we actually truly want to change, if you're sick of being in these dynamics, we have to see how we are showing up in ways that mirror that, in ways that draw that to us. And that's why it's so important we say know thyself. It really is to know thyself. You can spend so much time being like, he was so fucking narcissistic, and really focusing on him, but then you end up dating someone else and the same shit happens, instead of actually taking a step back and being like, how was I also showing up in these ways? How am I choosing this? Not allowing yourself to be the victim. I want to say side note here. I feel like a typical defense when all of this stuff can be triggered is that people can feel like, oh, you're victim blaming. And it's like, how am I victim blaming if I'm saying that you're not a victim? And I feel like that's an uncomfortable pill to swallow. It really is such an uncomfortable pill to swallow, because I'm not sitting here saying you're a victim. Actually, I'm saying the opposite. I feel that you are not helpless. You are a powerful being, and you can choose different. You have the power of choice. You have the power of awareness. It's just attuning that, turning it on, and actually taking responsibility for your choices, for the energies that you engage, that you move from. Have a big fat reality check. Honestly, I'm a big advocate for that. So anyways, that was a bit of a side tangent that kind of, ties in with all of it. So on to number 3, a deep craving for admiration. And once again, I feel like this can be seen on both sides, where somebody who is dating someone who is more directly narcissistic, they also have such a deep craving for admiration, where they're seeking it in an external source, where they're trying to pry it out of absent spaces, out of people who are so distant that they're not actually showing up and giving you true love, true presence, but they just crave the admiration. So even if the person gives it to you in quick hits, the common theme where somebody will pull away and then give you love and pull back and forth, where you crave it so strongly, you're so desperate for it that you will take the breadcrumbs. Where I'll use this metaphor, it's kind of silly, but let's say you feel like you can't actually make your own damn bread. So you're gonna take these little breadcrumbs that this person is giving you because you don't feel like you can make that loaf of bread. But I'm like, baby, you can make that loaf of bread. Like, you don't need to take these breadcrumbs. But you see, if you believe that you can't make the breadcrumbs seem so fulfilling when they're actually not filling you up. They're not helping. And also, this pattern of seeking love and absent spaces mirrors back your subconscious relationship to what you identify as love. And in a way, I feel like constantly seeking love from people who are so unavailable, that is self-abandonment. But it also mirrors your own way you're relating to yourself internally, where it's like, are you actually available? And that's a big topic I want to talk about another day, where I feel like, women will be like, I'm so sick of dating these unavailable men. But it's like, there's a part of you that is unavailable in a way too, because if you are allowing yourself to engage in these relationships, then that just points to that. I feel that it's a mirror. If you were truly available and not avoiding what is real, what is here, then you would choose a relationship that is actually showing up with presence. Because if you are orienting to yourself in that way, you won't take bullshit from other people. So it's like, if you are moving from that space, then you are going to only choose to engage in relationships like that. Like, if you don't respect yourself, then yeah, you're probably gonna allow somebody who doesn't respect you into your life. And I have definitely done that, bro. And number 4, people who are identified as narcissistic lack empathy. So this one can be interesting, because here's another phrase that I hear often, where people will say, I just cared too much. And here I will challenge you and ask you, did you actually care too much, or did you just lack boundaries and self-love? Like, genuinely. Because yes, perhaps there's the part of empathy involved where you felt deeply what the other person was feeling. But chances are, if you started to take it on as your own, then that gets into codependency. And then once again, if you go into this pattern of trying to save them, it's like, if you are actually moving from an empathetic space, that is a space that feels the person and acts in their best true interest. And saving somebody doesn't actually help them. Honestly, it robs them of the opportunity to grow, and you think that you're helping them. You think that you're fixing them, giving them long speeches. But actually, if you are operating from a space where you see them as helpless, like if you are truly operating from a space where you feel like you need to save them, maybe subconsciously, maybe you don't see it directly, but if you're subconsciously acting from that space, then that space believes that person is helpless, which that person perhaps is operating from a space that they believe they're helpless. They feel like they need to be saved. So you're reinforcing that identity that they are helpless by continually trying to save them in subtle ways. So it just becomes a loop, and it's just a vicious cycle. Ultimately, we're all on our own paths, and perhaps that person may never actually resolve what they're going through in this lifetime. Maybe they will, but regardless, you can't save them. And ultimately, this also all comes down to control, because if we feel uncomfortable, like we want to control and distort reality and try to fix and make it in our idealized image of what we want it to be. We can't control another person. The only true, healthy source of of control we have is through our choices, through making choices that actually take on responsibility. Because I feel like trying to save somebody is actually avoiding responsibility. I feel like a lot of the times we can be like, you know, I took on so much responsibility, his and mine, but it's like, did you actually? Because on the surface it may seem that way, but underneath it seems like you were just avoiding your own responsibility to recognize the truth of the situation of what is actually happening, and that you cannot control or force somebody out of their scenario. So if you are actually just trying to control, trying to contort reality to make it fit what you want it to be with this ideal, chances are you are going to be operating in subtly manipulative ways. It's all going to be a big lie. And I feel like that is such a hard pill to swallow, and to really hold ourselves accountable. If you truly want to break this cycle, then it starts within, because we can see this mirrored out in so many ways, like in our own personal relationships, the relationships to the government, the way the world is operating. Like, how deep does it run? We see that there's so many people in power that are being so manipulative, where yes, it's important to recognize what's going on in the world, but also I am a huge advocate for turning everything inward and being like, how am I also showing up in the ways that these people are? Because we can demonize all these people and point fingers, be like, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're evil. Where yes, let's acknowledge the behaviors that they're partaking in and how these behaviors can be harmful, yet also not just pointing fingers, but looking at ourselves and seeing how these are mirrored internally, and really taking accountability to show up different, to make different choices. We have a lot more power than we realize, but we waste it trying to control the external instead of sourcing that energy internally. So anyways, I'm gonna wrap this video up. I could talk so much on this topic, and I probably will. I'm sure there's gonna be many more videos talking about this from different angles and really just dissecting it. And I open this space up for conversation. If you genuinely want to have conversation, you know, you want to challenge an idea, you want to talk about it more, you want to share your perspective, then that's beautiful. Let's talk. Like, let's create conversation on this. And I suppose that's that. So till next time.